To the outside world, he's a hero, but it took just one eviction notice to expose the terrifying mask he'd been wearing for 12 years. With the police in his back pocket, is it even possible for an ordinary mother to escape the clutches of such a powerful husband? Why did a life built over a decade crumble to dust right before her eyes? How did an educated woman get trapped in such a twisted web of lies and false promises? And where does the story end for a mother fighting a lonely battle against a man everyone else fears? I'm Sneha, and I'll be walking you through this entire saga. Let's dive in and uncover the brutal truth hidden behind closed doors. The heat in Texas has a weight to it. It settles over the suburbs like a heavy, wet blanket, pressing down on the manicured lawns and the asphalt driveways until the air itself feels like it's vibrating. If you look down the long, winding road of our neighbourhood in the middle of a July afternoon, you can see the shimmer rising from the ground. It looks like water. It looks like an oasis waiting to cool you down, but we all know it's just a trick of the light. It's a mirage. You can drive toward it for miles, but you will never reach the water. You will only find more hot, dry pavement. That shimmer, that illusion, is exactly what my life has been for the last 12 years. If you were to drive past our house, you would see the picture of the American dream. It's a decent two-story home with a brick facade, the kind you see in every brochure for family living. There's a relentless hum of the central air conditioning unit on the side of the house, battling the humidity. There's a small garden out front that I try to keep alive on the weekends, fighting the scorching sun to keep the hydrangeas from wilting. To the neighbours, to the PTA moms, to the cashier at the local HEB grocery store, I am just another woman living the quiet life. I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a teacher. But the walls of a house are very good at keeping secrets. They are thick enough to muffle the sound of a raised voice, and they are sturdy enough to hide the fact that the foundation is cracking inch by inch, day by day. Our story began in 2012. It feels like a different lifetime now, like a movie I watched once and can barely remember the ending of. Back then, the future felt vast and open. We had plans, we had dreams, but time is a funny thing. It doesn't happen all at once. It slips away in the quiet moments, in the unchecked bank statements, in the cold dinners, in the silence that grows between two people sleeping in the same bed. I wake up every morning at 5:30 a.m. The house is still dark. This is the only time of day that belongs entirely to me. I make my coffee, the dark roast brewing in the silence of the kitchen, and I stare out the window at the backyard. The wooden fence is starting to warp from the rain and the sun, another thing on the list of repairs that will never get done. My husband is usually asleep at this hour, or at least he's in the bedroom. Whether he's sleeping or just lying there plotting his next big break, I never really know. For the last 5 years, the distance between us hasn't been measured in feet or inches. It's measured in resentment. He calls himself an entrepreneur. It's a fancy word, isn't it? It conjures up images of suits, boardrooms and late night strategy sessions, but in this house that word is a ghost. It's an excuse. It means there is no paycheck on Friday. It means there is no 401k, no health insurance contribution, no stability. It means he spends his days chasing shadows, schemes that go nowhere, business ideas that crumble before they even start, and vague projects that result in nothing but empty promises. I am a school teacher. I spend my days in a classroom full of energy and noise, shaping the minds of other people's children. I love my job. It grounds me, but it also exhausts me. And when the bell rings at 3 p.m, my second shift begins. My daughter is 12 now. She's in the 6th grade, middle school. That terrifying, beautiful age where a girl starts to understand the world isn't just fairy tales and playgrounds. She's sharp. She notices things. She used to go to the school where I teach back when she was in the playgroup, back when things seemed manageable. Now she's at a different campus, growing up faster than I can keep track of. From the moment she entered kindergarten until now, every single dollar spent on her education has come from my account. The field trips, the new sneakers, the lunch money, the science fair projects. It's all me, and it's not just her. For the last 8, maybe 9 years, I have been the engine keeping this sinking ship afloat. The grocery runs to stock the fridge, my card, the electric bill that spikes in the summer, my paycheck, the internet he uses to research his business ideas, paid by me. The maid service we occasionally hire because I'm too exhausted to scrub the floors. Me! I remember standing in the kitchen a few years ago looking at a pile of bills on the counter. The past due red stamps were starting to appear. I had asked him gently if he could cover the car insurance that month. Just one bill. He looked at me with a mix of irritation and disbelief, as if I had asked him to fly to the moon. I'm working on something big, he had said, waving his hand dismissively. The cash flow is tight right now. Just manage it. I'll pay you back when this deal closes. Manage it. That became the motto of my marriage. Just manage it. I managed it when the car needed new tyres. I managed it when the water heater broke. I managed it when my daughter needed braces. I even managed it when he needed capital for his business. Twice I went to my father, my poor aging father, who only wants to see his daughter happy. And I borrowed money, large sums. I handed it over to my husband with shaking hands, believing him when he said this was the turning point. He took the money. The business never happened. And when I asked for the money back to repay my father, he looked me in the eye and said, "What money? I never borrowed that much from you." That was the first crack in the glass that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just laziness anymore. It was malice. It was theft. But you keep going. You keep going because you have a child. You keep going because you live in a society where divorce is messy and complicated. And you keep going because you hope, foolishly, that the man you married is still in there somewhere, buried under the layers of failure and ego. My personal life became a series of subtractions. I stopped buying new clothes for myself. I took the bus or drove the old car to save gas. I stopped going to lunch with my colleagues. Every cent I earned was funneled into the black hole of our household expenses. Meanwhile, he paid the rent on the house sometimes when he felt like it, when he had a little cash from some odd job, but mostly he just existed in the space I was paying to maintain. The atmosphere in our home began to change. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence you feel before a tornado touches down. When I would ask for help with the finances, the silence would break, shattering into shouting. He didn't hit me. Not with his hands, but words can leave bruises too. He would scream. He would humiliate me. It didn't matter who was there. I remember one evening the house help was cleaning the living room and he started yelling at me because I hadn't ironed his shirt correctly. He called me incompetent. He called me stupid. He shouted until his face was red right there in front of the woman who was sweeping our floor. I stood there freezing, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, wishing the floor would just open up and swallow me whole. Later the argument would be smoothed over. Family would intervene. He's just stressed, they would say. Give him time. So 2 days would pass. He would be calm. And then the cycle would repeat. Nothing changed. The Texas Mirage continued to shimmer. But the biggest shift happened 3 years ago. That's when the darkness moved from our living room to the riverbank. He decided to open a business, a real one, he said, a food court or a sports bar. It was never quite clear what the vision was. Down by the river at the edge of town. It was a scenic spot in theory. In reality, it was isolated. I wanted to believe him. I wanted this to work. I worked extra hours tutoring students in the evenings, dragging my tired body from one job to the next to help him set this up. I poured my savings into it. But a business needs a manager. It needs dedication. What it got was a clubhouse. The place didn't make money. It made noise. It became a gathering spot for his friends, a collection of men who had nowhere else to be. They would sit there all day and night, drinking, playing loud music, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. He started spending more and more time there. I need to guard the equipment, he told me. I need to do inventory. Slowly, he stopped coming home. I remember nights lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning round and round. The empty space beside me in the bed felt cold. But strangely, it also felt like a relief. When he wasn't there, there was no shouting. There was no walking on eggshells. There was just me and my daughter. I would wake up, get her ready for school, drive her, go to work, come back, cook, clean and pay the bills. I was a single mother in everything but name. He would drift in and out like a tenant who didn't pay rent. He would come home to shower, maybe eat a meal, complain about the lack of support he was getting, and then leave again for his riverside kingdom. I tried to tell myself this was better. At least we aren't fighting. I thought, at least there is peace. But peace is not the same thing as emptiness, and the foundation was rotting faster than I knew. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being married to a ghost. You see other families at the park, fathers pushing swings, husbands holding their wives' hands in the grocery store aisle, and you feel a phantom pain. You mourn a death, but there is no body to bury. The person is still there, breathing, eating, taking up space in the world, but they are gone from your life. I didn't know then that the isolation was just the prelude. I didn't know that while I was keeping the lights on and the water running, he was digging a hole so deep that we were all about to fall into it. I remember driving home one evening last December. The Texas winter is mild, but the days are short. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. The house was dark. My daughter was inside, probably doing homework or watching TV. I sat in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. I looked at the brick facade of my house, the American dream. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a cold premonition that something was wrong. Not just the usual wrongness of a bad marriage, but something structural, something catastrophic. I didn't know it yet, but the Mirage was about to evaporate. The shimmering water was about to vanish, leaving us stranded in the desert. I took a deep breath, unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out of the car. The air was cool. A dog barked in the distance. I walked up the path to the front door, my keys jingling in my hand. I unlocked the door and stepped into the darkness of the hallway. The house smelled stale, like old air and unspoken words. "Mum," my daughter's voice called out from the living room. "I'm home, sweetie," I replied, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. I didn't know that the ground beneath our feet was already crumbling. I didn't know that the mail sitting on the kitchen counter, a simple white envelope with red lettering, was about to change everything. I put my bag down, I turned on the light, and for one last night I pretended that we were safe. But safety, just like the water on the road, was only an illusion. There is a specific kind of dread that comes with opening the mailbox. For most people, it's a mundane chore. You grab a handful of paper, coupons for pizza, a flyer for a landscaping service, maybe a birthday card if you're lucky. But for me, walking to that metal box at the end of the driveway became a daily act of courage. In a normal marriage, finances are a partnership, a shared ledger. You have column A, income, and column B, expenses. You sit down at the kitchen table with a calculator and a bottle of wine. You groan about the cost of electricity in the Texas summer and you figure it out together. But in my house, the ledger was a work of fiction. It was a ghost story. My husband didn't have a job. Not in the traditional sense. If you asked him at a barbecue what he did, he would lean back, swirl the ice in his drink and say, "I'm in business development," or "I'm working on a startup." He used buzzwords like venture capital, scalability, and market disruption. He played the part of the misunderstood genius perfectly. He would leave the house in the morning, dressed in smart casual, jeans and a button-down, carrying a leather laptop bag. He looked like a man going to conquer the world. But I knew the truth. That bag was empty. Or if it wasn't, it was filled with nothing but dead ends. For 5 years, his contribution to our bank account was zero. Actually, that's not fair. It was less than zero. He was a vacuum. I want you to understand the physics of my life during those years. I was a full-time teacher at the local public school. My day started before the sun came up. I was in the classroom by 7 a.m, managing 25 energetic kids, grading papers during my lunch break and dealing with administration meetings until late afternoon. Then I would rush to pick up my daughter, drive her to whatever activity she had, come home, cook dinner, clean the kitchen, and then grade more papers until my eyes blurred. My paycheck was the only thing standing between us and homelessness. Every single dollar I earned had a destination before it even hit my account: the mortgage, the car payment, the exorbitant cost of health insurance, the internet bill so he could research his projects. And then there was my daughter. Since she was in playgroup right up until now in the 6th grade, I have paid for every pencil, every notebook, every field trip and every lunch. When she needed a new dress for the school dance, I worked an extra tutoring shift to buy it. When she needed a laptop for her homework, I put it on my credit card and paid the minimum balance for months, watching the interest pile up like snow against a door. He watched all of this happen. He watched me age. He watched the dark circles under my eyes get deeper, and he did nothing. Sometimes late at night, I would try to talk to him. I would lay the bank statements on the table. "We're bleeding," I would say, my voice tight with panic. I can't cover the property tax this year. I need you to bring something in. Anything. Go drive an Uber. Work at Home Depot. Just help me. He would look at the papers with a sneer as if the numbers were beneath him. "You're thinking too small." He would say, I'm working on a deal right now that's going to net us 50 grand by next month. Just hold on. Stop nagging me. You have no vision. Vision, that was his favourite word. But you can't eat vision. You can't pay the electric company with vision. The worst part wasn't the work. I'm not afraid of hard work. The worst part was the hope he weaponised against me. There were times when he would come to me, eyes shining with manic energy. This is it, he'd say. I found a partner. We're importing textiles. It's a guaranteed return. I just need a little seed money to get the inventory released from customs. I am an educated woman. I teach logic. I teach critical thinking. But when you are drowning and someone throws you a rope, but you don't check to see if the rope is frayed, you just grab it. I remember the first time I went to my father. My dad is a retired man living on a fixed income. He saved his whole life to have a quiet retirement. I sat in his living room staring at the carpet, feeling the shame burn my face like a fever. I lied to him. I told him we were investing in a business. I made it sound safe. I made it sound smart. My father, because he loves me, wrote the check. It was thousands of dollars. I brought that check home like a trophy. My husband snatched it from my hand, his mood instantly lifting. You're the best, he said, kissing my cheek. You saved us. Watch, in 3 months, I'll double this. 3 months passed, then 6. Where's the money? I asked one night while washing dishes. It's tied up in logistics, he said, not looking up from his phone. A year later, I did it again. Another sure thing. Another desperate plea to my father. Another check. I handed over my family's safety net to a man who had holes in his pockets. And then the silence came. The business was never mentioned again. The returns never appeared. When the guilt became too much, I finally confronted him. We were in the car driving to a family gathering and the tension was thick. My dad needs that money back, I said. He has medical bills. You said you'd pay him back last year. He turned to me and his face was a mask of genuine confusion. What money? I felt the air leave my lungs. The money for the business. The 2 checks I brought you. He laughed. A short, cruel sound. I don't know what you're talking about. I never asked your dad for money. Maybe you spent it. Don't put your debts on me. I stared at him. The car was moving at 60 miles per hour, but I felt like the world had stopped. It wasn't just a lie. It was a rewriting of reality. He looked me in the eye and erased history. That was the moment I realised I wasn't dealing with a bad businessman. I was dealing with a thief who slept in my bed. From that day on, the dynamic shifted. I stopped asking for the big things. I stopped dreaming of the savings accounts or vacations. I just tried to survive. But he still had his pride. Oh, he had so much pride. He paid the rent on the house. That was his one contribution. It was his leverage. Whenever I complained about buying groceries or paying the internet bill or the maid service, he would throw that in my face. I put a roof over your head, he would shout. But even that was a lie. He paid the rent when he felt like it. There were months when he would come home with a new watch or a new pair of expensive sunglasses. I would ask, did you pay the landlord? Not yet, he'd say. I needed to look presentable for a meeting. Appearance is everything in my line of work. I need money for groceries. I would tell him the fridge is empty. Your daughter needs lunch for school. He would wave his hand, a gesture of kingly dismissal. I don't have cash right now. Just manage it. You're the woman of the house. Figure it out. Manage it. That phrase became the soundtrack of my life. The car is making a noise. Manage it. The air conditioning is leaking. Manage it. We are out of milk. Manage it. So I managed it. I cut coupons. I stopped buying coffee at Starbucks. I wore shoes with worn out soles. I borrowed small amounts from friends and pretended I had left my wallet at home. I became a magician of poverty, stretching every dollar until it screamed. But while I was pinching pennies, he was living a different life. I started to notice things. Small receipts left in his pockets, gas station charges on the joint credit card I hadn't cancelled yet. He was driving a lot, but where was he going? He wasn't going to office buildings. He wasn't meeting clients in the city. The mileage on the car was racking up. The gas tank was always empty when I got in to drive to work. Where were you today? I would ask. Scouting locations, he would say vaguely. Networking, but he smelled like stale beer. He smelled like cigarette smoke, even though he said he quit. The financial pressure was turning me into a person I didn't recognise. I was angry all the time. I was snapping at my daughter over small things. A spilled glass of water, a lost shoe. I would catch myself yelling and then I would run to the bathroom and cry, muffling the sound with a towel so she wouldn't hear. I was drowning and the person who was supposed to be my lifeguard was the one holding my head under the water. And the verbal abuse, that was the interest payment on his failures. The more he failed, the louder he yelled. It was was a direct correlation. If a deal fell through, which they always did, it was my fault. I wasn't supportive enough. I was bad luck. One evening, I came home to find him sitting on the couch watching a game. The house was a mess. The sink was full of dishes. I had just worked a 10-hour day. I put my bag down and sighed. Just a sigh. He exploded. "Don't you dare give me that attitude," he roared, jumping up. "You think you're better than me because you have a little job? You think you're the queen of this castle?" He screamed at me for 20 minutes. He called me names that I won't repeat. He humiliated me in front of the neighbours, the windows wide open. He stripped away every ounce of dignity I had left. And then, the next morning, nothing. He acted as if it never happened. "What's for breakfast?" he asked, pouring himself juice. It was psychological warfare, and it was expensive, but the ledger still had a missing page. I couldn't figure it out. Even with his lack of income, even with his laziness, the money didn't make sense. If he wasn't paying for anything, not the food, not the bills, not the child, then where was the little money he did hustle going? He occasionally did odd jobs. He sold things. He had investors sometimes. Where was that cash? I found the answer on a Tuesday. I was cleaning out the glove compartment of the car looking for an old insurance card. I found a crumpled flyer buried under a stack of napkins. It wasn't a business plan. It wasn't a bank receipt. It was a flyer for a grand opening. Riverside Chill Grill, live music, cold drinks, good vibes. I stared at the flyer. The address was down by the old industrial park near the river, a place that used to be a desolate strip of land. The date on the flyer was 3 years ago. I realised then that the business he had been talking about, the food court he claimed to be building, wasn't a business at all. It was a playground. And while I was here in this house deciding between paying the water bill or buying meat for dinner, he was down there building a monument to his own ego. He wasn't just incompetent, he was diverting resources. Every time he said, "I don't have cash," it wasn't because he was broke, it was because he was spending it somewhere else. I looked at the house, the peeling paint, the overgrown grass, the silent testament to my struggle. And then I looked at the flyer. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It wasn't the fiery anger of an argument, it was the cold, hard resolve of a detective who just found the murder weapon. I realised I didn't know my husband at all. I knew the man who shouted in the kitchen. I knew the man who slept in the master bedroom, but there was another man, a man who lived by the river, a man who had a whole other life that I was paying for. The ledger wasn't just unbalanced, it was being cooked. I crumpled the flyer in my hand. The paper made a sharp cracking sound in the quiet car. "Okay," I whispered to the empty garage. "Let's see what you've been doing." I didn't know it then, but I was about to walk into a world of neon lights and dark secrets. I was about to meet the version of him that his friends knew, the hero, the big spender, the king of the riverside, and that discovery would be the beginning of the end. The road to the river doesn't have streetlights. As you leave the paved safety of the suburbs, the asphalt gives way to gravel and the manicured lawns disappear, replaced by tall, unruly scrub oak and mesquite bushes. In Texas, the river bottoms are where things go to get lost. It's a place of shadows, of croaking bullfrogs, and of damp, heavy air that smells like mud and stagnation. 3 years ago, my husband told me this place was our future. He had come home one evening with a rolled up blueprint, or rather a sketch on a large piece of poster board. His eyes were wide, possessed by that familiar manic optimism. A food court, he had said, jabbing his finger at the paper. Not just a restaurant, a destination. Open air dining, string lights, maybe a small stage for local bands. Families will come from all over town. It's a gold mine, honey. The location is practically free. I looked at the sketch, I looked at him, and because hope is a dangerous drug, I took another hit. "Okay," I said, "how do we do it?" We didn't have capital. We didn't have investors. We had me. For 6 months, I lived a double life that exhausted me to my bones. By day, I was Mrs. Snehar, the teacher who graded history papers and organised the school bake sale. By night and on weekends, I was a construction worker, a janitor and a financier. I took on extra private tutoring students, cramming 3 or 4 sessions into my evenings until my voice was hoarse just to pay for lumber, wiring and permits. I remember weekends spent down there in the mud, hammering nails, painting repurposed shipping pallets to look like rustic chic furniture, and hauling bags of cement. He was there too, directing, pointing, acting the foreman. He loved the idea of being the boss. He loved standing with his hands on his hips, surveying his kingdom while I was the one sweating through my t-shirt, scrubbing grime off second-hand refrigerators. It's going to be beautiful. he would say, handing me a bottle of water while he drank a beer. Just you wait. And for a brief, flickering moment, it almost was. We opened. There were lights strung up between the trees. There was a counter serving burgers and fries. A few people came. I felt a surge of pride. Maybe, just maybe, this was it. But a business is like a garden. It needs constant tending. You have to weed it. You have to water it. My husband didn't want a garden. He wanted a party. Within 6 months, the food court concept began to rot. The menu shrank because he forgot to buy ingredients. The family-friendly atmosphere vanished when he started inviting his friends. Men from his past, men from the shadows of the city who had no jobs and nowhere to be. The family stopped coming. The strollers disappeared. In their place came loud motorcycles, beat-up trucks, and a cloud of cigarette smoke that hung over the place like a toxic fog. The food court died. The club was born. It became a structure of plywood and corrugated metal sitting precariously on the riverbank. He added a sound system that was far too loud for the space. He installed neon lights, cheap buzzing strips of purple and blue that made everyone look sickly and pale. It didn't make money. In fact, it hemorrhaged money, but to him, it was a success. Why? Because it was his stage. I remember driving down there one Friday night about a year ago. I hadn't seen him in 2 days. He wasn't answering his phone. I told my daughter I had to go to the store and I drove the dark gravel road to the river. I could hear the music before I saw the place. A heavy, distorted bass thumping against the trees. I parked my car in the shadows and walked up. The scene before me was like something out of a bad movie. There were about 15 people scattered around on the plastic chairs. Beer bottles littered the tables. The air smelled of weed and burnt grease. And there, in the centre of it all, was my husband. He was holding court. He was leaning back in a chair, a drink in his hand, laughing loudly at something one of his cronies had said. He looked happy, happier than I had seen him in years. He looked like a king. "Hey, the boss is buying the next round," someone shouted. And my husband stood up, grinning, and waved his hand. "Put it on my tab." I stood in the darkness, feeling a nausea rise in my throat. His tab? There was no tab. There was only my credit card bill at the end of the month. He was buying drinks for these leeches with money we didn't have, playing the role of the generous benefactor, while his daughter wore hand-me-down clothes and I ate leftovers for lunch. I stepped into the light. The mood shifted instantly. He saw me. The smile didn't just drop from his face. It was replaced by a look of sheer annoyance, like a teenager whose mum just walked in on a house party. "What are you doing here?" he asked, walking over to me, blocking me from his friends. "I haven't heard from you in 2 days," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and embarrassment. "You have a family. You have a home." "I'm working," he snapped, gesturing vaguely at the drinking men. "This is networking. This is PR. You don't understand how this industry works. You're embarrassing me." "Working?" I hissed. "You're drunk, and who are these people? Are they paying customers?" "They're potential investors," he lied. He didn't even try to make it sound convincing anymore. "Go home. I have to lock up later. I can't leave the equipment unguarded." That became the great lie of the last 3 years. Security. "I have to stay at the site," he would tell me on the phone. "There are thieves in the area. I have to guard the assets." The assets were a broken deep fryer and a cheap sound system, but he used that excuse to move out without actually moving out. He started sleeping there. He put a cot in the back room next to the dry storage. Slowly, the riverbank became his primary residence. Our house, the one I paid for, became a hotel he visited when he needed a hot shower or fresh laundry. I would lay in bed at home, the silence of the suburbs pressing in on me, and I would imagine him down there. I knew he wasn't guarding anything. He was escaping. He was escaping the reality of being a husband and a father down there under the neon lights. Nobody asked him why the rent wasn't paid. Nobody asked him why he hadn't contributed to his daughter's college fund. Down there, he was the big man, the entrepreneur, the host of the party. His friends, if you could call them that, fed his delusion. They were yes men. They drank his free beer and listened to his grand theories about life and business, nodding along because it kept the alcohol flowing. "Your wife just doesn't get you, man," I once heard one of them say when I walked up quietly behind the structure. "She's trying to tie you down." "Yeah," my husband had replied, his voice slurred. "She's narrow-minded. She thinks small." I'm a visionary. I walked away that night without saying a word. I got in my car and cried until I couldn't breathe. A visionary? A man who couldn't even buy his own daughter a birthday present without asking asking me for $20. The divide between us grew so wide that we were living on different planets. I was living in the real world, a world of bills, responsibilities, parent-teacher conferences and exhaustion. He was living in Neverland, a damp, mosquito-infested Neverland by the river where the party never ended and the bill never came due. He stopped coming home for dinner. He stopped asking about our daughter's grades. If I needed him, I had to call 3 or 4 times. And when he did answer, there was always noise in the background, laughter, music, the clinking of glass. I'm busy, he would say. I'm in a meeting. The meeting was always the same. Him sitting on a plastic chair watching the river flow by, wasting his life and my money. But the most painful part wasn't the money. It was the choice. Every night that he stayed there, he was making a choice. He was choosing that shack over us. He was choosing the adoration of strangers over the love of his family. I tried to intervene. I tried to stop the cash flow. I'm not giving you any more money for the shop, I told him one month. He didn't argue. He just got mean. He started selling things from the house, old electronics, tools, anything he could find. He borrowed money from neighbours, telling them sob stories about how I controlled the finances and didn't give him access to his own funds. He turned the community against me, painting himself as the victim of a shrewish wife. And the club kept running. It became a sore spot in the town. The police were called a few times for noise complaints, but because of his connections, his old buddies from his previous line of work, they never shut him down. They would drive by, wave, maybe stop for a free soda and leave. He was untouchable. He had built a fortress of garbage and charisma. The river represents flow, change, moving forward. But for my husband, that spot by the river was a stagnant pool. He was stuck there, suspended in a permanent adolescence, and I was the anchor he was dragging along the bottom, trying to cut the chain, but unable to find the strength. I remember standing on the porch of our house one night, looking toward the horizon where the city lights faded into the darkness of the river bottoms. I knew he was there. I could almost feel the bass thumping in the ground. I realised then that I didn't miss him. I missed the man I thought I married. I missed the partner I was promised. But the man sitting on a throne of plastic crates surrounded by sycophants and empty bottles, I didn't miss him at all. In fact, I was starting to fear him, because a man who lives in a fantasy world will do anything to protect it. He will lie, he will steal, and he will destroy anyone who tries to turn on the lights. I was the one holding the switch, and he knew it. The neon lights by the lake weren't a sign of life. They were a warning, a hazard sign flashing in the dark. Keep away, danger. But I couldn't keep away, and not yet, because we were still legally bound, financially entangled, and shared a child. I was trapped in his orbit, forced to watch as he spiraled closer and closer to the drain. I just didn't know how fast the spiral was about to get. I didn't know that the winter was coming, and with it, a coldness that would freeze whatever little humanity was left in his heart. The party was about to end, and the hangover was going to be lethal. Grief is a strange thing. We expect it to be loud, wailing, tearing at clothes, the cinematic outpouring of sorrow. But in my experience, real grief is quiet. It is a silence that descends upon a house like a heavy snowfall, muffling every sound, every joy, every bit of light. It turns the world grey. Last year, that silence came for me. It was November. The Texas heat had finally broken, replaced by a damp, bone-chilling cold that seeped through the thin walls of our house. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was the kind of phone call every child dreads, the one that divides your life into before and after. My mother was gone. She'd been my anchor through the 12 years of my chaotic marriage, through the financial droughts, through the lonely nights while my husband played king of the riverbank. My mother had been the one steady voice on the other end of the line. She was the one who sent secret checks for my daughter's birthday. She was the one who told me I was strong when I felt like crumbling. And suddenly the line was dead. I remember standing in the hallway, the phone slipping from my hand, hitting the hardwood floor with a plastic clatter. The sound echoed. I fell to my knees, not because I decided to, but because my legs simply stopped working. I couldn't breathe. The air felt too thin. In a moment like that, your instinct is to reach for your partner. You reach for the person who stood beside you at the altar and promised to hold you in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. You reach for the other half of your soul. I picked up the phone and dialed him. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. calling. I called a third time. Finally, he picked up. I could hear the wind whipping against the microphone. He was outside. I could hear the faint thump of bass in the background. He was at the river. What? He answered, no, hello. No, are you okay? Just an irritated exhale. I'm busy with a supplier. Make it quick. Mum is dead. I choked out. The words felt like gravel in my throat. She died, David. She's gone. There was a pause on the line, a long, static-filled silence. I waited for the shock. I waited for the comfort. I waited for him to say, I'm coming home right now. Oh, he said. His voice was flat, detached. That's bad. When did it happen? Just now, I sobbed. I need you. Please come home. I can't. I don't know what to do. I can't just leave, he replied, his tone shifting from indifference to annoyance. I have people here. I'm in the middle of a transaction. You call your sister. You handle the logistics. I'll come when I'm done. I'll come when I'm done. He hung up. I sat on the floor of the hallway for an hour, staring at the front door, waiting for it to open. It didn't. Darkness fell. The street lights flickered on. I had to get up. I had to make dinner for my daughter. I had to explain to a 12-year-old girl that her grandmother was never coming back, all while her father was drinking beer by a river 5 miles away. He came home at 2 a.m. I was awake, sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, insurance forms, funeral arrangements, flight details. My eyes were swollen shut. He walked in, smelling of stale smoke and cheap cologne. He didn't come to me. He didn't hug me. He walked to the fridge, took out a bottle of water and leaned against the counter. So, he said, taking a sip, when is the funeral? Thursday, I whispered. Thursday's bad for me, he said, frowning. I have a meeting with the distributor. Something inside me snapped. A tiny, fragile thread that had been holding on for a decade finally broke. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't see a husband. I saw a monster in human skin. It's my mother, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I didn't know I possessed. You are coming! You are going to stand there and you are going to pretend to be a decent human being for 2 hours. Is that too much to ask? He looked surprised by my tone. He wasn't used to me fighting back. He shrugged. Fine, I'll be there, but don't expect me to stay for the reception. I have a business to run. And all the days that followed were a blur of black dresses and condolences. But amidst the grief, a new horror began to unfold. You would think that seeing your wife in pain would soften a man, but for a narcissist, someone else's pain is an inconvenience. It's a threat. Because for those few days, the attention wasn't on him. It was on me, and he couldn't stand it. He started the gaslighting the very next day. I was crying in the bedroom, packing a suitcase to go to my parents' house for the service. He came in and stood in the doorway, watching me with cold, shark-like eyes. You're overreacting, he said. I froze. Excuse me? The crying, the drama, he gestured at me. She was old. People die. You're making a scene. You're doing this for attention, aren't you? I stared at him, unable to comprehend the cruelty. My mother just died. I am grieving. You're hysterical, he sneered. It's embarrassing and you're weak. My mother is sick too, you know, but I don't go around crying like a baby. You need to pull yourself together. You have responsibilities here. Who's going to pay the internet bill if you're gone for a week? That was it. That was his concern. Not my heart, not my soul. But who would pay the bills while I was burying my mother? He came to the funeral, but he stood apart from us. He spent the entire time on his phone texting. When family members approached him to offer condolences, he was rude. He made off-colour jokes. He acted like a bored teenager forced to attend a church service. My family saw it. My aunts, my cousins, my father, they all saw it. They saw the way he wouldn't hold my hand. They saw the way he rolled his eyes when I broke down during the eulogy. After the service, my uncle pulled me aside. Sneha, he said, his voice low and serious. That man, he is not with you. He is dangerous. You need to be careful. I knew he was right, but I was too weak to fight. I was hollowed out, and when we returned to Texas, I hoped for peace. I hoped for space to heal. Instead, he escalated. He began to accuse me of things that made no sense. It was as if my vulnerability triggered his paranoia. Who were you talking to at the funeral? He asked one night, cornering me in the kitchen. My cousins, my family, I said, exhausted. I saw you talking to that guy, the tall one. You were whispering. That's my cousin David. We were talking about the casket. You're a liar. He spat. You're using this grief thing as a cover. You're planning something. You're talking about me behind my back, aren't you? You're turning them against me. He was projecting. He was the one hiding things. He was the one living a double life. But in his twisted mind, I was the villain. I was the one plotting. He started calling my family members. He called my grieving father. He called my sister. Sneha is losing it, he told them. She's mentally unstable. I'm worried she might hurt herself. She's neglecting the house. She's spending money we don't have. He tried to to paint a picture of me as a crazy, irresponsible woman hoping to cut me off from my support system. He wanted to isolate me so that I would have no one but him. But he miscalculated. My family knew me. They knew I was the one who had supported him for 12 years. They knew I was the one who paid the bills. They listened to his ranting, raving phone calls, and they realised the truth. They realised he was a parasite trying to protect his host. My sister called me one evening. He called me, she said. He told me you were having an affair. He told me you stole money from him. I felt the blood drain from my face. What did you say? I told him to never call this number again, she said fiercely. I told him if he contacts Dad one more time, I'm calling the police. Sneha, we are done with him. He is dead to us. You need to get out. You need to get out. The words hung in the air. I hung up the phone and walked into the living room. He wasn't there. He was at the river, of course. The house was silent. My daughter was in her room wearing headphones, blocking out the world. I sat on the couch in the dark and I thought about my mother. I thought about how she had worried about me. I thought about how she used to say, better to be alone than to be in bad company. I realised then that the marriage had died long before my mother did. It had died somewhere between the unpaid bills and the neon lights. It had died in the shouting matches and the silent treatments. But I had been performing CPR on a corpse, trying to breathe life into something that was already rotting. The grief for my mother was sharp and hot, but the grief for my marriage, that was cold. It was a numbness that spread from my fingers to my toes. I stopped cooking for him. I stopped doing his laundry. I stopped asking him when he was coming home. When he did come home, usually to grab a change of clothes or to demand money, I looked right through him. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I gave him nothing. What's wrong with you? He would ask, unnerved by my silence. Why are you acting like a zombie? I'm fine, I would say. 2 words, a wall. He ramped up the abuse. He called me a cold bitch. He told me I was unlovable. He told me that no other man would ever want a baggage like me. You're old, he sneered. You're boring. You're nothing without me. But his words didn't hurt anymore. They bounced off me. Because to be hurt, you have to care. And I didn't care. I was in the winter of silence. I was hibernating. I was conserving my energy because deep down, I knew the spring was coming, and with the spring, the ice would crack. I just didn't know that the crack wouldn't come from me. It wouldn't come from a divorce lawyer or a counselling session. It would come from a piece of paper stuck to our front door. I didn't know it yet, but while I was mourning my mother, he was burying us in debt. While I was crying for the past, he was destroying our future. The silence was about to be broken by the loudest noise of all, the sound of everything falling apart. One evening in January, I was grading papers at the dining table. The heating vent rattled. The house felt too big, too empty. I looked at the picture of my mother on the mantelpiece. Her eyes seemed to follow me. Be strong, she seemed to say. The storm isn't over. And she was right. The storm hadn't even started. The wind was just picking up, and the shelter I thought I had, this house, this roof, was about to be ripped away. January in Texas is a deceptive creature. It's not the white, silent winter of the north. It's a grey, damp season where the sky hangs low like dirty cotton and the wind cuts through your coat with a wet, biting chill. It was a Tuesday. I remember the day because Tuesdays are faculty meeting days. I had come home late, my head throbbing from 2 hours of discussing curriculum changes and standardised testing. The house was quiet. My daughter was in her room, the soft glow of her iPad illuminating her face as she did her homework. I walked into the kitchen and flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. I frowned, flipping it up and down a few times. Bulb must be out, I thought. I walked to the living room and tried the lamp. Nothing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Not the kind you get from a flu, but the primal kind. The kind that tells you a predator is nearby. I looked at the microwave clock. It was blank. The hum of the refrigerator, a sound so constant you forget it exists until it's gone, was absent. The silence was deafening. Mum, my daughter's voice drifted down the hallway. The Wi-Fi just died. I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer and walked out the front door, shivering as the cold air hit my face. I went to the side of the house where the utility meters were, and there it was. A red tag, a plastic zip tie sealing the box shut, service suspended. I stood there in the dark, my breath misting in the air, staring at that red tag. It wasn't just a piece of plastic, it was a verdict. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the electric company. The automated voice was cheerful, mocking me. We're sorry, but your service has been disconnected due to non-payment. The outstanding balance is... The number she read out was staggering. 4 months. 4 months of unpaid bills. But how? I paid for the groceries. I paid for the car. I paid for the school supplies. He paid the rent and the utilities. That was the deal. That was the one thing he was supposed to manage with his business earnings. I hung up. I didn't call him. Not yet. I went back inside. It's just a power outage, honey. I lied to my daughter. Probably a line down in the neighbourhood. Grab a sweater and some candles. My phone rang in my hand. It wasn't him. It was a number I didn't recognise. Hello? Is this Mrs. Sneha? A man's voice, rough. Angry. Yes, this is Mr. Henderson, the property manager. My heart hammered against my ribs. We had lived here for years and I had never spoken to the landlord directly. My husband always handled it. Yes, Mr. Henderson, how can I help you? You can help me by telling me why your husband has been dodging my calls for 3 weeks, he barked, and why the cheque he gave me last month bounced. Again, bounced. I whispered. I'm done playing games with you people, Henderson said. I know he's a smooth talker, but I'm running a business, not a charity. You are 5 months behind on rent. 5 months. The room spun. I had to grab the kitchen counter to keep from falling. 5 months. That meant since August, since before my mother died. So I didn't know, I stammered. He told me he paid it. He told me everything was fine. Lady, I don't care what he told you. I care about my money. I'm filing for eviction tomorrow morning. You'll have the sheriff at your door with a notice to vacate. You have to get out. Please, I begged, the dignity draining out of me. Please, sir, I have a 12-year-old daughter. It's January. We have nowhere to go. Just give me a chance to. I gave him 10 chances, he shouted. He looked me in the eye last week and said the wire transfer was coming. He lied to my face. I'm done. Expect the notice. The line went dead. I stood in the dark kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear. The darkness of the house suddenly felt heavy, like it was crushing me. He knew. He knew when I was crying over my mother's casket that we were about to be homeless. He knew when he bought himself a new pair of boots last week that the electricity was about to be cut. He knew every time he sat at this table and ate the food I bought that he was lying to me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, metallic clarity wash over me. I told my daughter to pack a bag for a sleepover. We're going to stay at a hotel tonight, I said, forcing a smile, just for fun. Since the power is out, I drove her to a nearby Holiday Inn, used my credit card to get a room and set her up with the TV. I have to go check on something at the house, I told her. I'll be back soon. I got back in my car. I didn't go to the house. I drove to the river. The road to his club was muddy from the recent rain. My sedan skidded on the gravel, but I didn't slow down. I wanted to tear the world apart. I saw the neon lights from a mile away, purple and blue, glowing like a radioactive bruise in the night. I could hear the music. It was a Tuesday night, but the bass was thumping. I pulled up right to the entrance, my headlights cutting through the gloom. There were 4 or 5 cars parked there. I slammed my car door and marched up the wooden ramp. He was there. Of course he was there. Well, he was sitting at a high-topped table, a cigarette in one hand, a beer in the other. He was wearing a leather jacket I had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He was laughing at something a man with a ponytail was saying. He looked comfortable. He looked warm. He looked like a man without a care in the world. He saw me coming. The laughter died in his throat. He stood up, putting on that familiar mask of defensive arrogance. Sneha! What the hell? You can't just barge in here. I'm in a meeting. The power is out, I said. My voice was low, deadly calm. What? He blinked. Oh, yeah, I forgot to pay the bill. I was going to do it tomorrow. Relax. I'll call them in the morning. Mr. Henderson called me, I said. That stopped him. His eyes darted to the side, looking for an exit, looking for a light. We are 5 months behind on rent, David. 5 months. He's exaggerating, he said quickly, waving his hand. It's 3 months tops, and I have a deal working. I told him. He's evicting us, I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, silencing the music, silencing the bar. The other men looked down at their drinks, awkward and embarrassed. We are being kicked out tonight. My daughter is in a hotel room because our house is dark and cold, and you are sitting here drinking beer. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard. Lower your voice, he hissed, pulling me away from the table. You're embarrassing me in front of my investors. I yanked my arm away. Investors, look around you, David. These are bums. This is a shack. There is no business. There is no money. It's all a lie. He shoved me. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to make me stumble back. You don't know what you're talking about, he snarled, his face twisting into something ugly. I'm building an empire here. You're just too stupid to see it. You want to talk about the house? Fine, let's talk about the house. We don't need it. I stared at him. What? The rent is too high anyway, he said, pacing back and forth, his manic energy taking over. Henderson is a crook. We should leave. We don't need to pay him another dime. And go where, David? Under a bridge? He stopped pacing and pointed to the back of the club, to a door that led to a storage room. We can live here, he said. I looked at the door. I looked at the rotting wood of the floorboards. I looked at the river, dark and swollen. Just a few yards away, I smelled the stale beer and the cigarette smoke. Here? I whispered. Yeah, he said, his eyes lighting up with a delusional excitement. It's perfect. No rent. We save money. I can keep an eye on the business 24/7. We put a mattress in the back room for the kid. It's an adventure, like a loft apartment. I looked at him and I finally understood. He wasn't just a liar. He was insane. He was so deep in his own fabrication that he was willing to drag his wife and his 12-year-old daughter into a squalid, dangerous shack by a river just to keep his fantasy alive. He was willing to sacrifice our safety, our dignity, our very lives, just so he didn't have to admit he had failed. You want our daughter to live in a bar? I asked. It's not a bar, it's a venue, he shouted. And why not? She can help out, learn the business. It'll be good for her character. I took a step back, then another. No, I said. What do you mean? No, I am not moving my child into this dump, and neither are you. You have no choice, he yelled after me as I turned around. The eviction is coming. You have nowhere else to go. You'll be back. I got in my car. I locked the doors. I saw him standing on the ramp, shouting into the wind. A king of nothing? I drove back to the hotel. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the stiff hotel bed, listening to my daughter breathe, and I formulated a plan. The tears were gone. Tears are for when you have hope that things can be fixed. I knew now that nothing could be fixed. It had to be amputated. The next morning, I took a half day off work. I dropped my daughter at school and I drove to the property management office. Mr. Henderson looked surprised to see me. He was a big man sitting behind a desk cluttered with files. He looked ready to yell again. Mr. Henderson, I said, standing in front of his desk. I didn't sit down. I am not here to make excuses for my husband. He is a liar and I am leaving him. Henderson blinked. The anger in his face softened just a fraction. I didn't know about the rent, I continued, my voice steady, but I know about it now. I can't pay you 5 months of back rent today. I don't have it, but I have a job. I have a salary. I am asking you, begging you to give me 30 days. The notice is already typed up, he said, tapping a red piece of paper on his desk. The red notice. Please, I said, don't file it with the court yet. If you file it, it goes on my record. I'll never be able to rent another apartment in this state. I need to find a place for me and my daughter. Give me 1 month. I will move out. I will leave the house clean and I will set up a payment plan to pay you back every cent we owe, even if it takes me 5 years. He looked at me. He looked at the desperation in my eyes and the exhaustion etched into my face. He saw a mother who was cornered. He sighed and tossed the red paper into a drawer. 30 days, he said, not a day more. If you aren't out by March 1st, the sheriff comes. Thank you, I whispered. I walked out of his office into the bright, cold sunlight. I had bought myself 30 days to dismantle 12 years of a life, 30 days to find a new home, pack up a house and escape without him knowing. Because that was the key. He couldn't know. If he knew I was leaving, he would sabotage it. He would destroy the house. He would threaten me. He would use his police friends to intimidate me. I went back to the house and the power was still out. I packed a bag of clothes, grabbed the important documents, birth certificates, passports, social security cards, and put them in the trunk of my car. When he finally came home that afternoon, smelling of the river, the power was back on. I had paid the overdue balance on my lunch break, draining my savings account to zero. See, he said, gesturing at the lights. I told you I'd handle it. I called them. Everything is fine. He took credit for my sacrifice. He stood there in the house he hadn't paid for, under the lights he hadn't kept on, and acted like the hero. Yes, I said quietly, turning away so he wouldn't see the look in my eyes. You handled it. I let him believe it. I let him believe he had won. I let him believe that I was the stupid, submissive wife who would follow him to his shack by the river if push came to shove. But in my head, I was already gone. I was already scanning the apartment listings on my phone while he was in the shower, and I was already calculating how many boxes I would need. The red notice was hidden in Henderson's drawer, but its shadow was hanging over the house. The clock was ticking. I had 30 days to execute the greatest escape of my life. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that if I failed, if he caught me before I could get us out, the next notice wouldn't be for eviction. It would be for something much, much worse. The game of cat and mouse had begun, and I was done being the mouse. There is a sound that signifies the end of a marriage. It isn't the sound of a gavel banging in a courtroom, and it isn't the sound of a door slamming shut during a fight. For me, it was the sound of packing tape. Rip, smooth cut. That sharp tearing noise became the soundtrack of my February, but it was a sound I had to muffle. I packed in the margins of the day. I packed while he was at the river guarding the assets. I packed while he was asleep. I packed with the desperation of a fugitive, hiding boxes in the back of the closet, under the bed, in the trunk of my car. I had 30 days. Mr. Henderson, the landlord, had given me a deadline, March 1st. If we weren't out, the sheriff would be at the door. My husband, in his infinite delusion, seemed to have forgotten about the eviction, or maybe he just didn't care. To him, consequences were things that happened to other people. He was still floating on his cloud of narcissism, convinced that a big check was coming next week, next month, always just around the corner. Why are you moving those books? He asked me one afternoon, catching me putting a stack of novels into a crate. My heart stopped. I froze, holding a copy of The Great Gatsby in mid-air. Just cleaning, I lied, my voice tight. Donating some old things, decluttering. He shrugged, grabbed a soda from the fridge and walked out. He didn't even look at the crate. He didn't notice that the photos were missing from the mantelpiece. He didn't notice that the soul of the house was being dismantled piece by piece. Finding a new place was a nightmare. My credit score, once pristine, had taken a hit from the joint accounts he had neglected, and I had no deposit money. I had to scrape together every penny from my teaching salary, skipping lunch, selling a few pieces of jewellery at a pawn shop in the next town over so he wouldn't find out. I found it on a rainy Tuesday. It wasn't a house. It was a small apartment in a complex about 20 minutes away. It was a downgrade in every sense. Smaller square footage, older appliances, a view of a parking lot instead of a garden. But when I walked in, I smelled fresh paint. I saw a deadbolt on the door, and for the first time in years, I felt the possibility of exhaling. I signed the lease with a shaking hand. I held the key, a small silver piece of metal, and I wanted to cry. It felt heavier than it looked. It felt like freedom. The confrontation happened a week before the move. I couldn't hide it anymore. The boxes were piling up. I found an apartment, I told him. We were in the kitchen. He was eating cereal, scrolling on his phone. He stopped chewing. What? The eviction is next week, David. I found a place for me and the kid. We are moving on Saturday. He slammed the spoon down. Milk splashed onto the table. I told you we don't need to move. We can go to the club. I'm setting up the back room. It's going to be great. No, I said, we are not living in a shack. We are moving to the apartment. He stared at me, his eyes narrowing. He was assessing the situation. He realised I wasn't asking for permission. I was stating a fact. And then I saw the gears turn in his head. He realised that if I moved out, he wouldn't have to worry about the rent here anymore. He wouldn't have to deal with the landlord. He could go live his bachelor fantasy at the river full time without a nagging wife and child. Fine, he spat. Go, run away. You always were a quitter. You can't handle the pressure of the entrepreneurial lifestyle. Go live in your little box. Are you coming? I asked. I knew the answer, but I had to ask for the record. To an apartment, he laughed. No way, I can't be tied down. I need to be near the business. I'll stay at the club. I'll come visit. I'll come visit. Like we were a petting zoo, like we were a roadside attraction. The day of the move was chaotic. I couldn't afford professional movers, so I hired a guy with a truck from an online ad. My husband, in a bizarre twist of psychological warfare, decided to help. He didn't help pack and he didn't help clean, but he carried the heavy furniture. He lifted the couch, flexing his muscles, making sure the guy with the truck saw how strong he was. He was performing. He wanted to be the hero of the moving day. See, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. I got this. You'd be lost without me. He drove a load of boxes to the new apartment. He walked in and looked around the small living room with a sneer of judgment. It's small, he said. The carpet is cheap. It's home, I said, cutting the tape on a box. He didn't stay. He dropped off a few more things, some kitchenware, my daughter's bed frame, and then he checked his watch. I gotta go, he said. The Friday crowd is coming in at the club. I need to prep the bar. He didn't hug us goodbye. He didn't say, I'll miss you. He just said, don't lose my number, and walked out the door. I listened to his truck engine fade away down the street. I locked the deadbolt. Click. I slid down the door and sat on the floor of the empty entryway. My daughter came out of her new room. She looked at me, then at the door. Is Dad coming back? She asked. Not tonight, honey, I said. Tonight, it's just us. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved, and that broke my heart more than anything else. The first few weeks in the new apartment was strange. It was quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. The absence of tension. I didn't have to listen for the sound of his key in the lock. I Didn't have to worry if he was in a good mood or a bad mood. I could leave a glass of water on the table and know it wouldn't be knocked over in a rage. But he didn't disappear. He morphed. He transformed into something perhaps even more insidious. The Disneyland dad. Since he wasn't paying rent, wasn't paying for utilities and wasn't buying groceries, he suddenly had a little pocket money. The money he made from his club, which was never enough to support a family, was plenty enough to support a weekend bachelor lifestyle. He would show up unannounced. He would bang on the door on a Saturday afternoon, grinning, smelling of cologne. "Hey, who wants ice cream?" he'd shout. "My daughter would light up. She's 12. She wants her father's love. She doesn't understand the economics of emotional abuse." He would take her out for an hour. He would buy her a giant sundae, maybe a cheap toy or a t-shirt. He would tell her stories about how great the business was doing, how he was going to buy a boat soon, how he was going to take her to Florida. Then he would drop her off, sugar crashed and confused, and leave again for a week. He never asked if I needed money for rent. He never asked if she needed shoes for school. He never asked if the fridge was full. He just swooped in, took the credit for being the fun parent, and swooped out, leaving me to do the homework, the discipline, and the bill paying. "Dad is so cool," my daughter said one evening. "He said he's going to buy me a dirt bike." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. "That's nice, honey," I said. I knew there was no dirt bike. There never would be. But I couldn't be the one to destroy her hope. He was doing a good enough job of that on his own. But his ego couldn't handle the separation. Even though he chose not to live with us, the fact that I had left him, that I had walked away from his control, gnawed at him. He needed to be the victim. He needed to be the hero of his own tragedy. So the smear campaign began. I started hearing things. It's a small town. People talk. I ran into an old neighbour at the grocery store. She looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and suspicion. "I heard you guys split up," she said. "Yes," I said, reaching for a carton of milk. "We're living apart." "David told my husband that you cleared out the house," she said, lowering her voice. "He said you took everything, the furniture, the electronics. He said he came home and the place was stripped bare. He's sleeping on a cot at his business because you took his bed." I froze. The carton of milk felt like ice in my hand. "I took the furniture I paid for," I said, my voice shaking. "I took my daughter's bed. I left him the couch. I left him the TV." "Oh," she said, clearly not believing me. "Well, he seemed pretty upset. He said you just vanished without a word." He was rewriting history. He was telling anyone who would listen, his drinking buddies, the neighbours, the parents at the school, that I was a thief, that I was a cold-hearted woman who abandoned her struggling husband and stole his possessions. And because he was charismatic, because he was a local business owner with a smile and a handshake, people believed him. But it didn't stop at gossip. He escalated to intimidation. On one evening, about 2 months after I moved, my phone rang. It was a local number. "This is Officer Miller," a voice said. My stomach dropped. I knew that name. Miller was one of the regulars at the club. One of David's buddies. "Yes," I said. "I'm just calling as a courtesy," Miller said. His tone wasn't professional. It was conversational, oily. "David's been talking to us. He's pretty broken up about some missing properties. Some tools, some expensive audio equipment." "I didn't take any audio equipment," I said, panic rising in my chest. "I took my clothes and my daughter's things." "Look," Miller said, "we don't want to make this a legal thing. Nobody wants to file a theft report, but David is a good guy. He's a pillar of the community down there at the river. You don't want to make enemies with the wrong people, Sneha." It was a threat, thinly veiled, but a threat nonetheless. "Are you accusing me of something, officer?" I asked. "Just advising you," he said. "Maybe you should return the items, or maybe you two should work this out. He says you're not letting him see his kid." "He sees her whenever he wants," I cried. "He just doesn't come." "That's not what he says," Miller replied. "Just think about it. You don't want trouble." Click. I sat on my cheap beige sofa, trembling. He was using the police. He was using his connections to terrorise me in my own home. I had moved 10 miles away, but his shadow was still stretching across the city, darkening my doorstep. I realised then that physical distance wasn't enough. I had changed my address, but I hadn't changed my status. In his eyes, I was still his property, and a narcissist never lets go of his property without a war. He wanted me to be scared. He wanted me to come crawling back, apologising, begging for his forgiveness. He wanted to break me. I looked at my daughter, who was sitting at the small dining table doing her math homework. She was humming a song. She looked peaceful. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going back. Not to the house, not to the marriage, not to the fear. He thought sending a cop to call me would make me crumble. He thought spreading lies would shame me into submission, but he forgot one thing. I had spent 12 years managing a crisis. I had spent 12 years holding up a falling sky. I was stronger than he could ever imagine. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot, at the street lights flickering on. "You want to fight, David?" I whispered to the glass. "You got one." But I knew I couldn't fight him with shouting matches or emotional pleas. I needed armour. I needed a weapon he didn't understand. I needed the law, not his buddies in blue uniforms who drank at his bar. I needed the real law. I walked to the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. I typed into the search bar, divorce attorneys, Travis County, aggressive. The midnight move was over. We were settled. Now it was time for the final battle. It was time to sever the limb to save the body. I clicked on the first link, consultation request. I began to type. The lawyer's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in downtown Austin. It was a world away from the muddy riverbanks and the peeling paint of the rental house I had left behind. Here the air was cool and smelled of leather and expensive coffee. The noise of the city was just a hum below us, detached and distant. I sat in a high-back chair, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Across from me sat Mrs. Reynolds. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie a man could possibly tell. "So," she said, looking over the file I had prepared, "let me get this straight. You've been the sole provider for how long?" 8 years, I said. "Maybe 9. He pays for nothing. Not the rent, not the food, not the child. And he's demanding full custody. He's threatening it," I corrected. "He says he has friends. He says he knows the judges. And he says he'll make sure I never see my daughter again if I file for divorce." Mrs. Reynolds took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly with a microfiber cloth. "He's a narcissist, Sneha. And narcissists love to tell ghost stories. They love to scare you with monsters that don't exist." "But they do exist," I whispered. "He knows the police. He used to work in security. He drinks with the deputies at his club. Last week, a patrol car parked outside my new apartment complex for an hour. Just sat there. It was Officer Miller, his buddy. It was a message. This is the reality of my life now. I am free physically. I live in a clean, quiet apartment. I pay my own bills, but I'm living in the shadow of a man who believes he is above the law. The last 8 months have been a lesson in psychological warfare to the outside world. My husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, is a charismatic, struggling business owner. He's the guy who buys a round of shots for the bar. He's the guy who slaps backs and tells jokes. He has cultivated a persona of the lovable rogue. But to me, he is a terrorist. I haven't spoken to him since the day I moved out. I blocked his number. I communicate only through email and only regarding our daughter. But his silence is louder than his shouting ever was. He hasn't apologised, not once. In 8 months, there has been no, "I'm sorry I failed you." No, "I'm sorry I lied about the rent." No, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when your mother died." Instead, there is only the smear campaign. He tells people I am crazy. He tells people I am unstable. He tells the parents at my daughter's school that I abducted her, even though he knows exactly where we live. He plays the victim so well that sometimes in the dark of the night, even I start to question my own sanity. Did I overreact? Should I have stayed? But then I look at my bank account. It's small, but it's mine. It's positive. There are no mysterious withdrawals. There are no lies. And I know I made the right choice. The problem is the injustice of it all. He pays 0 child support, nothing, not a dime. Yet every other weekend he demands to see his daughter. And when he does, he puts on the show, the Disneyland dad. He picks her up in a truck he probably borrowed. He takes her to the movies. He buys her junk food. He buys her expensive sneakers that I can't afford. He fills her head with promises of vacations he can't pay for and a future he hasn't built. Dad says he's going to expand the club, my daughter told me last Sunday when she came home. He says he's going to be a millionaire soon. I looked at her innocent face and I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and say, "He is lying to you. He is using your college fund to buy beer for his friends." But I can't poison her against him. That's what he does to me. I have to be the bigger person. I have to be the rock. But being the rock is exhausting when the water keeps crashing against you. Mrs. Reynolds put her glasses back on. "Sneha, in the state of Texas, the law is very clear. It doesn't matter who he drinks beer with. It doesn't matter if he knows the sheriff. Facts are facts. And the fact facts are you are the primary caregiver, you are the financial provider, and he is negligent. I'm afraid, I admitted, I'm a school teacher. I don't have power. He's famous in this town. People like him. People like Ted Bundy too, she said dryly. Likeability is not a legal defence. She pulled out a yellow legal pad. We are going to file for divorce on the grounds of cruelty and financial abandonment. We are going to ask for full physical custody with supervised visitation for him until he can prove he has a stable residence that isn't a shack by a river. We are going to garnish his wages, if he ever has any, for child support. And the money, I asked, the years I supported him, the loans I took from my father, the settlement he promised me, alimony, she said firmly, spousal support. We will audit his so-called business. We will subpoena his bank records. If he has been hiding money, we will find it. If he has been spending marital assets on his club, that is fraud. We will go after everything. He owes you a settlement, Sneha, not just for the money, but for the time, for the 12 years. Hearing her say that was like breathing pure oxygen after holding my breath for a decade. He owes me. For so long, he made me feel like I owed him. He made me feel like I was lucky to be his wife. He made me feel like I was a burden, a nag, a boring woman who didn't understand his genius. But the truth is, I was his investor. I was his safety net. I was the foundation upon which he built his castle of lies. And now I am pulling the foundation out. It's going to be ugly, Mrs. Reynolds warned me. When a man like that gets cornered, he lashes out. He will use every trick in the book. He will lie in court. He might try to intimidate you again. I know, I said. Are you ready for that? I thought about the night the power went out. I thought about the eviction notice. I thought about his cold, dead eyes when I told him my mother had died. I'm not the same woman I was last year, I said, and he thinks I'm weak because I stayed silent for so long, but I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was silent because I was surviving. Now I'm done surviving. I want to live. Good, she said, uncapping a pen. Then let's go to war. Leaving her office, I walked out into the bright Texas sunlight and I walked to my car, checking the mirrors, checking the back seat. A habit I haven't been able to break. I drove toward the school to pick up my daughter. As I drove, I passed the turnoff for the river, the road that leads to his club. For a split second, I felt the old pull of fear. I imagined him down there, sitting on his throne of plastic crates, holding court with Officer Miller and the rest of his cronies, laughing about how he scared his wife away. But then I felt something else. Rage. Not the hot, chaotic rage of an argument. This was a cold, hard, useful rage. It was fuel. He thinks he is untouchable because he is a man in a man's world. He thinks his connections will save him, but he forgets that the legal system runs on documentation, not handshakes. He forgets that while he was partying, I was keeping the receipts. Every bank statement, every text message, every threatening voicemail, I have it all. I am a teacher, I value homework, and I have done mine. I pulled up to the school. The bell rang and a flood of kids poured out. I saw my daughter. She was laughing with a friend. She looked happy. She looked safe. She got in the car and tossed a backpack in the back. Hey, Mum, can we get pizza tonight? Sure, honey, I said. We can get pizza. Dad called me today, she said casually, buckling her seatbelt. My hands tightened on the wheel. Oh, what did he say? He said you're trying to take his money. He said you're going to make him poor. I looked at her. He is already poisoning the well. He is already trying to turn her into a weapon against me. Honey, I said gently. Dad is confused. Adults have to sort out money things. It's not your job to worry about it. Dad has plenty of money for his business. He just needs to learn how to share. She shrugged. Okay. I looked at the road ahead. It was long. It was going to be bumpy. There would be court dates. There would be screaming matches. There would be nights where I would barricade the door and sleep with my phone in my hand, ready to dial 911. I know he won't give up easily. He's a man who feeds on control, and I have committed the ultimate sin. I have taken control away from him. He will use his police friends. He will use his reputation. He will try to break me financially and emotionally. But I have something he doesn't have. I have the truth. I am Sneha. In my language, my name means affection or love. But names can change meaning. Today, my name means resilience. I started the car and drove away from the past, away from the river, away from the mirage. The stranger in my house is gone. The ghost is exorcised. I am alone, yes, but for the first time in 12 12 years, the house is not haunted. I am a single mother in Texas. I am a teacher. I am a survivor. And as I merge onto the highway heading toward a small apartment that smells of lemon polish and freedom, I realise one thing. This isn't the end of my story. This is just the first page of the book I was always meant to write. Let him call his friends. Let him play the victim. Let him sit in his crumbling kingdom by the water. I have a daughter to raise. I have a life to build. And this time, nobody is going to turn off my lights.